Fantastic. So his talk is called Free Will, a Beautiful and Useful Illusion. Please welcome Dan Barker.
I suggested, well, how about the battle of church and state? Because that's very important this year and the next few years, I think. The Freedom from Religion Foundation is growing fast. We have now more than 26,000 members and 7 full-time attorneys working, and they can't get the work done because there's so many complaints that come in. But Bruce said, well, what other topics do you have? And I said, well, I could talk about my book, my story, Godless, how a preacher became an atheist. But I've told that story a lot, and some of you have read the book, and it's now it seems to me like ancient history. Then the book that came out in 2015, Life-Driven Purpose. Some of you get the joke, right? How purpose is bottom up, not top down. And by the way, if meaning in life comes from trying to solve problems, we are going to have a very meaningful next few years, I think. At the Freedom from Religion Foundation, we took a full-page ad out in the New York Times that said the only wall we need is between church and state. And then I suggested, well, how about my most recent book, God, the Most Unpleasant Character in All Fiction? And some of you know where that's from. Richard Dawkins wrote the foreword to the book. It's his sentence. The God of the Old Testament is arguably the most unpleasant character in all fiction, jealous and proud of it, a petty, unjust, unforgiving control freak, a vindictive, bloodthirsty ethnic cleanser, a misogynistic, homophobic, racist, infanticidal, genocidal, filicidal, pestilential, megalomaniacal, sadomasochistic bully. And so Richard suggested that each of those words could be a chapter of its own, you know. And so in part 1 of the book, I take all of those 19 nasty adjectives and prove that those are actually true, the genocide and all of that stuff. And I call it, part 1 is called Dawkins Was Right. But then I found some that he overlooked. Maybe he didn't overlook them, but maybe he thought 19 was enough. So I found 8 more in there, pyromaniacal and aborticidal and so on. So part 2 is Dawkins was too kind. But I'm not talking about this book today. I have an in-between book that's coming out pretty soon. I'm actually working on a major project about worship. You know how Sam Harris wrote a book called The End of Faith, you know, examining why do we believe. And there's a lot of good explanations, and Michael Shermer and others have come up with good explanations for why we believe, why we have faith, why we have religion. But there's very little on why do we actually worship? What is that instinct within us to worship? And I've asked around, and Daniel Dennett and others said, you know, that would be a good project. But this in-between thing, I just had a thing about a project about free will that's going to be, the contract isn't signed yet, but it's going to be a book that Sterling Publications is coming out with. And Michael Shermer wrote the foreword to the book, and it's called Harmonic Free Will, how the melody of science and the harmony of philosophy create a beautiful and useful illusion. So right there, the word illusion is right in the title, so no secrets, right? In his book, Free Will, Sam Harris writes that free will is an illusion, and he's absolutely right. It is an illusion in the mind. But I argue that an illusion, unlike a delusion, can be benign and sometimes even beneficial. Sometimes illusions can be good for us. And so since this is brand new and the book isn't even published yet, I thought what I would do is read the very brief introduction to the book, and then I'll put that aside and talk about some of the meat of the book as well. Free will is dead. Long live free will. Free will is a paradox. We don't have it, and yet we do. While science tells us that everything is completely determined, we live our personal and social lives as if we are free, autonomous agents. What's going on? By the classical definition, free will is indeed dead. But in your own mind, and in most legal and moral philosophies, it appears to be alive and well. The paradox is not unlike the perplexity of the dual nature of light. How can light be both a wave and a particle? How can we be so certain that free will does not exist and yet behave as if it does? When biologist Richard Dawkins was asked if there's a scientific basis for free will, he acknowledged the perplexity. He said, "I have a materialist view of the world. I think that things are determined in a rational way by antecedent events. That commits me to the view that when I think I have free will, when I think that I'm exercising free choice, I'm deluding myself. My brain states are determined by physical events. And yet, that seems to contradict, to go against the very powerful subjective impression that we do have free will." Scientists and philosophers have been battling with the problem of free will for at least 2,000 years. There's hundreds of books and articles about it. The Oxford Handbook of Free Will has 600 pages, which looks more like an encyclopedia than a handbook. Like theology, which is another subject with no object, the subject of free will creates an octopus of opinions. We're all experts in it, right? We all have an opinion about it, one way or another. It's a fascinating inquiry, but I want to slip outside the debate and propose an understanding of free will that turns it on its head and makes the paradox vanish. I suggest that if we can learn to think more like a jazz musician than a classical musician, we will see that free will is a beautiful improvisation of the human species. And no matter what your opinion is, you feel like you are free, don't you? You feel like it, even right now. As you are reading this paragraph or listening to this talk, you certainly don't think you are coerced by the forces outside of your control to continue listening or reading the next sentence. You don't feel like a robot. You can improvise. Science and philosophy should try to explain this reality that we experience, not deny it. So there are two questions. Do I have free will? And why do I feel like I do? Both of these can be addressed by science, but I think sometimes we mix the arguments for one with the arguments for the other. Although related because they're both asking about our material brain, I think we need to approach the questions independently. I think they reside at different logical levels. They are like melody and harmony, which do not compete with each other, but they cooperate to create beauty. Just to be clear, I'm certain that contra-causal free will is a fiction. The word illusion is right in the title of the book. By affirming philosophical free will instead of scientific free will, which is what I'm saying, jazz instead of classical, I'm not dismissing determinism. I'm adding to it. Even though classical free will does not exist, I think the term free will is an undeniable quality of our existence and identity. Identifying it becomes a matter of perspective, not of physical proof. I think when we rotate the question on its axis, we will see that free will is indeed a useful social truth that creates no conflict with science while it enriches our lives. The only thing that can contradict determinism is indeterminism. And since free will, as I understand it, is not indeterministic, it poses no threat to science. By a two-dimensional understanding, as opposed to a flat deterministic or a top-down transcendent definition or dualistic definition, free will is no challenge to cause and effect. I know hard determinists will be skeptical of yet another attempt to salvage free will, but I think harmonic free will actually underscores the strength of their good scientific arguments, and it underscores ethics. I'm not a professional philosopher or neuroscientist. I used to be an ordained Christian preacher. I preached about souls and spirits and ghosts, and I believed in God. When Moses exhorted the Israelites to choose life so that you and your descendants may live, I understood as a believer that each individual created in God's image possesses this transcendent liberty to make a personal decision for eternal perdition or eternal life. I now dismiss that dogma of theological freedom as incoherent. It's unscientific and it is coercive, actually. Free will is not transcendent. It is, as I will explain in the book, transient. As a professional jazz pianist, which is a lot more fun than preaching, I approach music from two different angles. Like classical musicians, I rely on the formal bottom-up training of sight reading and technique, but as a jazz improviser, I try to rise above all of that without ignoring it and freely create from a top-down frame of reference. When you invert the scene, you can see or you can hear that music is not linear. It's more like it's holistic. And I think we can do this with consciousness and free will. We can flip the perspective, and suddenly we will see or hear that the world and ourselves are coming from a free and creative vantage point. I'm not even going to try to touch all the topics in the vast literature. That would require a work larger than the Oxford Handbook. You don't have to be an expert to notice that the experts disagree. And as skeptics, we point that out, don't we? You know, I have my position, you have yours, but there's disagreement. Why? Same thing with theology. Besides, I'm not going to attack this problem head on. I'm not going to solve the problem. I am suggesting that there's no problem in the first place. And if that is true, then there is no need to find a right answer. By taking a step sideways and looking at it from a fresh angle, I think we can make the whole so-called problem of free will disappear. Like Sean Carroll said last night, we need a new vocabulary. The manifest world that we live in is different from the subatomic particle world. We need a new way of talking about it. And many writers, Michael Gazzaniga in his wonderful book, Who's in Charge, says that. We need a new way of talking, a new way of framing these things in what some people say an emergent way of talking. So to do this, I'm going to tell some stories, introduce a number of analogies and models, or as Daniel Dennett would call them, intuition pumps, many of which will seem unrelated. All analogies will become strained if you push them too hard, and they don't prove anything by themselves. We should never argue by analogy, but we can certainly illustrate by analogy. These illustrations are aimed at picturing how free will can be meaningful without being an object of quantifiable measurement. If you look straight at it, you don't see it. You have to sneak up on it laterally. So that's the end of the introduction. The book goes into all the basic classical questions. Basically, my position is that free will is not an essence. It is a quality. It's not a cause of anything. It's a result. I think free will is a product of behavioral judgment, similar to how beauty is a product of aesthetic judgment. Does beauty exist? Is beauty a thing? Is beauty something that you can measure? You and I might look at a work of art, and you might say, gosh, that's beautiful. And I might go, huh? I might listen to a jazz combo, and I'm just getting goosebumps, and you might go, that's just noise, right? So where's the beauty? What is the beauty? I'm making an aesthetic judgment, and then something emerges. Not supernatural. Beauty's not supernatural. Beauty is an illusion in our minds, right? So I think behavioral judgment produces the quality of free will similar to how aesthetic judgment produces the quality, not the essence of beauty. They look like they're jumping outside of linear determinism, don't they? They look like they're emergent properties. They exist, but at a higher logical level, at a human social level. Like beauty, I think free will is a harmony of more than one bell ringing at once. Sam Harris says free will is an illusion. He's absolutely right. But an illusion is not necessarily a bad thing. Notice that Richard Dawkins didn't title his book The God Illusion. He called it The God Delusion. Illusions are rooted in reality. but they don't become a reality in the mind. When you see an illusion, you know, oh, my brain's playing a trick, right? You don't say, oh, that's really real. When you look at the Necker cube, or when you look at the duck and the rabbit thing, you know your brain is doing something, right? You know it's an illusion, and you go, oh, that's fun, or you might enjoy it. Delusions, I think, of course, are much more likely to be dangerous. A delusion is not rooted in reality, but it becomes a reality in the mind. You actually think the God, the soul, the spirit, the demons, you actually think those things are real things when there's no actually evidence for them. Let me give you one good example. And again, this is an analogy, so we can't push them too hard. But how many people do you see standing on the stage right now? One. Actually, you're getting two separate images of me right now, aren't you? Go your eyes back and forth, you're seeing two of me, right? But your brain is putting those two images together to make, what do they make? Stereo vision, depth perception, right? That's an illusion in the brain. Your brain is playing this trick. It's beautiful, it's wonderful, it's a great illusion, and it's useful to us. And we know it's an illusion. You all know that your brain is doing whatever this thing is that the brain does, which is pretty magical. Actually, there is only one of me, and my image is rooted in reality. You're seeing two of me, but you're combining that. Most people have what we would call stereo vision. I have what my doctor calls monovision. Some of us don't have stereo vision. My eyes don't work together. This right eye of mine, I can see really far. I can read distant road signs. I can read signs in the supermarket. I can pretty much read everybody's name tag with this eye. This eye is opposite. It's really nearsighted, and it's perfect for reading. I can read books. I can read this computer here with this eye. Most of the day, I don't need to wear glasses. I also have some strabismus, so when I'm looking at you guys right now, I'm seeing two audiences right now. And my doctor says that drives some people crazy, to see two things at once. If I'm talking to Margaret at normal distance, even right now, I see Margaret's face clear, but I see another, like a doppelganger over here, like a fuzzy one, you know. And so what I do is I just use the eye that I need. And maybe some of you are like that in the room, right? Do some of you others have monovision or whatever? So it's usually not a problem. This monovision I have is usually not a problem, except when I'm driving at night. Because a car's coming in, there's 4 headlights. And there's 2 center lines, and that's whoa. Or when I'm in a dark theater looking at a movie and there's 2 actors on the screen. So I have glasses. I put these glasses on at night when I'm driving, and then whoa, what just happened was like magical. Suddenly I see one audience in this depth perception that all of you are normally seeing. And if you've never seen in monovision, you don't realize how beautiful depth perception is. It's like I want to reach out here. You ever put on the goggles at a 3D movie? You feel like it's reaching out. You feel like it's really there, but it's not. So this image that we have is an illusion, but it's gorgeous, it's beautiful, and it's very useful. Annie, Lori, and I were up in the North Shore of Lake Superior this last summer. She was invited to give a talk, and so we were walking along this really rocky coastline. And there were these boulders and rocks in the water, and so she was scampering along like a young teenager, just going way up. And me, I was like an old person, like, and then after a few minutes, it dawned on me, put your glasses on, stupid. And then I put on my glasses, and then I could almost catch up with Annie Laurie. I put on these glasses, and I felt younger. I felt more energetic. I felt more confident. My judgment was better. This illusion that happened when I got depth perception, it enhanced and it enriched my life. So I think free will is like, and don't push the analogy too hard, but I think free will is like looking through 2 different eyes at once. One of the eyes is behavior. The other eye is judgment. And when you put behavior and judgment together, you have the judgment of behavior. Behavior, I think, is like melody. Determinism, cause and effect, are like a beautiful melody. If you look at melody on the printed page, you see it's like a graph, right? You see it's going through time, the frequency goes up and down, and you see this note follows this note follows that. It's horizontal. But harmony is not horizontal. Harmony is vertical. Those of you who are musicians know that when you when you're thinking about harmony, people who play one note at a time, like a trumpet player or a singer or my dad was a trombone player, they tend to think primarily in terms of melody, this way, horizontally. Play this note for this time, this note for this time. But people who deal with more than one note at a time, like pianists and guitarists, composers and arrangers and that, we tend to think primarily not so much linear this way, but vertically this way. A stack of notes is a chord that produces harmony. So a note, any particular note that you have, can have meaning either melodically or harmonically. Sometimes the harmony changes and the note doesn't. Sometimes the note changes and the harmony doesn't. You know that song, One Note Samba? The first 8 bars of that is just the same note, but the background harmony is changing. So the note's staying the same, but the background is changing because you're thinking vertically instead of horizontally. If you compose, you can have the same note. For example, if I went da 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 da, that high note sounds like it wants to resolve back down. Da, melodically, it feels like it wants to pull down. But if I'm thinking harmonically, that's actually the minor third of the 4 chord, da 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 da, it actually has a tension that wants to pull up. And you find that a lot. George Gershwin did that in the song, But Not For Me. Although I can't dismiss, he goes up with the note. Although you feel the note wants to go up harmonically, but if you're thinking this way, the note wants to pull down. There's a tension to the note that could go either way. So which is it? Is it a contradiction to say that the note wants to pull down, if you're thinking melodically, and at the same time say that the note wants to pull up if you're thinking harmonically? It's not a contradiction. You have to specify the axis you are using. And when you do that, you see that, well, you can say 2 contradictory things about the same note, and they both make sense. So I think we can say that with free will as well. If we switch perspective, a simple analogy is sand. Is sand hard or is sand soft? A grain of sand, what is it? It's hard. So is sand hard or is sand soft? It's both, right? You have to specify, don't you? There's an individual. If you specify the individual grain of sand, you're thinking horizontally, like, scientifically, right? But if you're thinking about the group, that raises it to a different level, right? You're no longer thinking about it like this, you're thinking about it like this. So we are social animals. As individuals, we evolve like a grain of sand. We evolve, cause and effect, across this melodic line that looks at our past and the next thing and the next and then what's going to happen next, like Sean told us last night. Maybe not, we shouldn't even use cause and effect at that level. We should just talk about the laws of nature. But we didn't just evolve as single individuals. We evolved as social animals. Our brains evolved to be social. Our brains evolved to think not just horizontally, but also vertically at the same time. So if I swat a mosquito, I'm exercising judgment, simple judgment. If I swat my neighbor, what's different? A social aspect is added, right? A moral aspect, a higher logical sphere is added to the basic scientific level of cause and effect. Because we are social animals, when I swat my neighbor, it's more than just a simple judgment. There's all sorts of other things that come into play in our brains which evolved to be social animals. When you saw Tom Hanks in that movie, Castaway, he started talking to what was the name of the soccer? Wilson, yeah. He couldn't help it. Even when you're all by yourself, you're a social animal. Our brains have evolved to be not just horizontal, but vertical. What if my actions, am I a grain of sand or are we a group of sand? What are we and which are we? So determinism, I think, is inescapable. And since the only thing that can contradict determinism is indeterminism, the real debate is not really between determinism and free will, because I think free will can be formulated in a deterministic way. Just like 2 different notes are ringing, they're 2 separate notes, but they produce harmony. What is the harmony? Where is the harmony? When 2 notes are playing in the air, you're not hearing 2 separate channels coming to your ear. What are you hearing? You're hearing an interference pattern that those 2 notes produce. The interference pattern hits your ear, and then your brain decodes it and goes, oh, that's pretty, that's harmony. Or it's dissonant, that's ugly, whatever. So I think even a libertarian, transcendent, dualist, soul kind of a free will, if such a thing actually existed, which I used to believe in, even that would be deterministic. Even that, because what makes you you? What makes your soul a soul? What makes a God, right? To be defined is to be limited, and whatever's limiting whatever that thing is would be a determining factor. So even a libertarian soul, spooky, woo-woo kind of a free will, if such a thing exists, and I don't think it does, it itself would also be deterministic by some, if not by the known laws of science, then by something else, right? So you can't escape determinism wherever you go. The debate isn't really between determinism and free will. It's between natural determinism and supernatural determinism. That's where the debate is. Is there a dualistic supernatural world regardless of free will? I point out in the book, how much time do we have here? Okay. Philosophers like John Searle, what's the book, Mind, Body, and Language, points out that we have something that we call social truths that are different from scientific truths. Scientific truths are what you might call the horizontal melody of science. Social truths are what you might call the vertical, philosophical harmony of the society in which we live. For example, marriage. What is marriage? Marriage isn't a thing. We all agree with that. It's an understanding, right? Have you ever looked to see if someone's wearing a wedding ring? That's just a band of metal on a finger, right? But what does that mean when you see that? What is marriage? I perform weddings. My ordination is still good, by the way, which is part of the lawsuit, by the way, where I'm suing Congress because the chaplain is refusing to allow me to give a non-religious invocation. He said, oh, you can't give an invocation because you need to be ordained. Well, I am. I have an ordination. I've been performing weddings for freethinkers for at least 30 years now. And when we go through the vows, the couple standing there, and then I get to say, I now pronounce you man and wife, or I now pronounce you a married couple, whatever words they want to use. That pronouncement creates a social truth. Hardly anything changes in the world, right? Science didn't change, right? There's no new scientific discovery that was made. The lives of a married couple might be hardly any different from the lives of those who live together without marriage. Marriage is one of those truths that exist at a higher logical level. We talk about marriage. We all know marriage isn't a thing. We all know you can't find it out between the stars somewhere. We know that we're creating this in our mind. Maybe marriage is an illusion, and maybe some more than others. But in any event, there are many truths that we talk about. Money is another example. Look at the patterns on a $1 bill compared to a $100 bill. It's just paper with ink on it, right? Which would you rather have? Why? Why? Is there any difference in the value of those two papers? It's minuscule, whatever it is. It's not 2 orders of magnitude different. So it's a social truth. It's an agreement. There's a lot of things that we go through life with, as Sean was saying last night, in the manifest world that are truths that exist within our minds, either as an illusion or as an agreement or an understanding among ourselves. And there are many examples of social truths. So I kind of think free will is one of those social truths. It doesn't exist in you or in me. It doesn't exist in the grain of sand itself. Michael Gazzaniga, in his book, Who's in Charge, says he thinks free will and moral responsibility exist in the gaps between people, right? Where's the softness of the sand? Where is that softness? How would you even quantify where that softness in the sand is? It's because it's a property at a different logical level. So free will is contentious. Dawkins wrote the foreword to 2 of my books, so I sent him a copy of this manuscript, and he sent me an email back. Wait, let me see if I can find it here. He turned down writing a blurb for this book. He said, free will is one of those hot potatoes I don't feel qualified to touch. I think you are bold to do so. And even in this audience, there are people who are on one side or another. I don't think it's fair. Michael Gazzaniga and others have pointed out that sometimes the hard determinists have been characterized as a kind of fundamentalists. I don't think that's fair, because at least the arguments that is Jerry here? Jerry Coyne is one. Jerry Coyne arguments are evidence-based, right? They're solid, good reasons. And actually, they are right. If you're looking at the world this way, they're absolutely right. We can't argue with them. The only place where I differ with someone like Sam Harris is that I agree it's an illusion, but he doesn't think the illusion is useful. I do. I think illusions can be useful, as long as we know they're illusions, right? We're not pretending that there's some spooky woo-woo essence that somehow transcends, as if pretending that harmony somehow escapes the natural universe because, well, look what the harmonic effect of this thing happening. We know that. We understand that. We can say, big deal. It'd be like this last November, Annie, Leroy, and I went to the Grand Canyon. We got up really early to watch the sunrise over the Grand Canyon, an amazing experience. And in November, there weren't that many people, and at that time of the morning, we felt like we had the whole canyon to ourselves. And so we saw the light, and we saw the colors changing, and it's really a pretty amazing experience. But I bet none of you took issue with me using the word sunrise. Did you? You know what I meant, don't you? Was the sun rising? What was happening? The canyon was rising, right? And the canyon was rotating, actually. It wasn't even rising. Rotating out of the shadow of night into the light of the sun. We call it sunrise. And would a really strict determinist come up to me and say, "You stupid, stop using that phrase. You should know better than that. The sun is not rising." Well, duh, I know that, and you know that. It's a way we talk with each other, right? So I think the same thing with free will. Stop talking about free will, you stupid, because we know we don't have it. Well, duh. This is the way perspective that we live our lives in, is a life from a human perspective. So even believers disagree about free will. I used to be a believer who thought human beings have the free choice to choose God or not, and therefore the death of Jesus on the cross was meaningful because I'm choosing that. Have you heard the old joke? If Jesus died for my sins, who am I to make his death meaningless by not committing any? But other believers, Calvinists, Martin Luther has a whole book called The Bondage of the Will, that humans don't have free will, that it's all preordained. So there's a big debate even among believers. So it's a mistake to think that free will is primarily a theological doctrine. There are atheistic naturalists who actually think there is free will. There are dualist atheists who think you can formulate free will in a kind of natural, what they call libertarian, not the political word, but the word libertarian. And one of those is Alfred Mealy. I read his book, Free, and I like a lot of his book, but he thinks that there actually is some kind of, maybe from quantum uncertainty or whatever. And in fact, he was very helpful. In fact, Jerry Coyne was very helpful in helping me revise this book as well, because his criticisms were very spot on and strong. You want to anticipate criticisms, right, when you write a book this kind of hot potato, like Richard Dawkins says. So I did a debate 1 or 2 months ago in Whitewater, Wisconsin, at the university, on prophecy. And I think the illusion and the feeling of free will that we have in our minds comes from the fact, and even Sean talked about it last night, comes from the fact that we don't know the future yet, right? So not knowing the future, you can model in your brain different outcomes, can't you? You can model what you might do. You can have multiple probable or plausible outcomes in your brain. Only one of them is going to happen. If determinism is right, then there really is only one future. That doesn't mean you can predict it, but there's only going to be one future. But before that happens, you have an uncertainty in your brain in which you don't know, so you're modeling this one and that one and this one and this one. It looks like you have a choice, doesn't it? It feels like you have a choice because you don't know that you don't have a choice, so you're making that decision. And what do we tell little children when they do something good? When a child learns how to walk or something, do we say, "No big deal, you had no choice," right? Don't we applaud that? Don't we say, "Good job"? We build up self-esteem by applauding this feeling. The kid actually didn't have choice, if you look at the big picture and the horizontal picture. But the feeling of self-esteem and the feeling of self-worth and self-actualization that comes from this illusion that we have can be motivating, can be good. Illusions can probably be bad as well. So during this debate on prophecy, and the book of Daniel is what it was all about, which was pretty silly. This guy claimed that proof of God's existence is that the book of Daniel accurately, hundreds of years before the event, predicted these exact things to happen in the 2nd century BC. So I asked my opponent, does God have free will? Because in order to have free will, whatever it is, even if you don't think it exists, in order to have it, your brain has to be in a state of uncertainty. It has to be in a state of not knowing. Your brain has to be in a state of having what appear to be, if not in actuality, at least what appear to be open options. But if you know the future, you can never be in that state, can you? An omniscient being could never have a period of decision in which it says, oh, I could do this or I could do that, because it knows in advance what it's going to do, right? So forget about human free will. Does this omniscient being, does this all-powerful God know what it's going to do? If God knows what he's going to do tomorrow at 12 noon, because he's God, he knows everything, right? When tomorrow comes, can he change that? That would put some limits on his power, wouldn't it, right? He's supposedly all-powerful but all-knowing. Suppose you're praying to him for a sunny church picnic, but, can see, oh, well, I guess I'll change my mind. If he changed his mind, then he wasn't omniscient in the first place. So something's got to give there. So I think even if you do believe in free will, either dualistic or theologically, it is deterministic, and it totally obviates omniscience. You can't know the future. So he didn't have an answer for that. All he said was, well, you don't know what free will means. And I said, well, explain it to me. What does it mean? He said, free will just means acting according to your nature. So God is acting according to his nature. That's so he's free to act according to his nature. And I said, well, then does a computer have free will? It's acting according to its nature. Does a chipmunk have free will? By the way, I have a great story of a chipmunk in here in our backyard. And you can go online and see a video of me over 2 years. Finally, the chipmunk is actually crawling up my leg and coming on the... It's really cute. And it looks like... I know the chipmunk is a deterministic natural mammal, right? And it's not picking its thoughts. It didn't choose to be a chipmunk. It just evolved like the rest of us. But it sure looks like something's going on. It's alive. Its eyes look alive. It's sniffing. It's moving. And we relate to this living thing as if it had some choice in what it was doing. Because it didn't have to come up to me and risk this big mammal hurting it. Now we're kind of buddies. I can't wait for the spring to come and see if he comes back out of his... he might stay there with the pile of nuts I gave it last year. Let me repeat. Harmonic free will is what I'm calling it. I'm not suggesting this is going to be the great vocabulary game changer. This is just my way of thinking about it as a musician. And by saying harmonic free will, we are qualifying it. So it's like saying really but not really, right? So we can say that with illusions, really but not really. Harmonic free will is kind of like a song. It's a human creation. It's a beautiful composition of behavior and judgment, and I didn't talk much about that today, so you'll have to buy the book. It's a beautiful composition of behavior and judgment, which is melody and harmony, that produces the useful illusion of freely chosen personal actions. Some people say that free will is a necessary component of moral accountability and moral responsibility, because how can you hold people morally responsible? Sam Harris does a good job in his book of showing how brain tumors affect criminal behavior, and then how we modify our assessment of their culpability. Sometimes they're guilty or they're not guilty because of mental illness and all that kind of stuff. A great topic. But I think free will is one of those many works of art that reveal that we are more than just a swarm of atoms in motion. Free will, I think, makes us fully human. We made that. We created it, and we know it's a creation, and we know it's an illusion, but we love it, and it helps us navigate. Just like depth perception helps us navigate where to put your foot. It doesn't tell you where to put the foot. It just helps you decide. Free will, I think, helps us navigate moral decisions when we're looking at intentionality it takes 12 people to adjudicate the guilt of a single defendant, right? You have to think about all the factors that played into this. So free will is one of those temporary, it's kind of like an imaginary number. What is I? What is it? The square root of a negative number. Does that exist in reality? It doesn't, right? Because it's incoherent. But it does exist in equations as long as it cancels itself out. You can use an imaginary number that It's there, but it's gone. And I think free will is like that. It's a necessary imaginary number, an illusion, a component of the soft sand, if you will, of the harmony of all these notes playing at once, that gives us the ability to have some depth perception in making moral decisions in our social lives as human beings. So I will stop there. Are we going to be done or take some questions?
No, we're good. Dan Barker, ladies and gentlemen. Dan Barker.